Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is where writers like to gather together weekly and talk about all things writing for writers and by writers. And we're really glad to see so many writers gather here today in person, or those of you that take the time to watch it on the replay. Thank you, because we know there's a lot of you that catch us later. So we really appreciate you watching the replay on that. So welcome, everybody. My name's Jean Wise. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined today by two of my trusty partners, Bethany Jett. Hi, Bethany, and Melissa Stroh, and she is doing our recording and our behind the scenes. And we have a special guest today. I am so excited to have Hope here today and talk about pitching to agents at writers' conferences. It's one of her favorite topics. But let me introduce Hope a little bit to you. First of all, Hope is an agent works with Kyle Young at Heartline, right? And we are excited to have her here. Been an agent for several years there. We'll catch up on that. And I love the way she describes herself on her website as a combo of being driven and nerdy. And I think that's a good lesson for us, because she found a really catchy way to describe herself. That's a good lesson for us writers to tuck away to do that. And you would not believe, she may look young, guys, that you would not believe her resume. Over 800 of her works have been in various productions already, publications already. And she probably writes 250 to 300 articles a year. Now think about that. Talk about building a platform. I mean, that just puts me to shame. How many articles have I written this year if you don't count my blog?
I know.
Oh, so anyway, there's hope. There is hope and hope in that way. But anyway, she does a lot. Most of you that are listening are familiar with Serious Writer, and she does the Serious Writer newsletter. And I know she helps Bethany a lot. I may have Bethany jump in and say something about that. To Bethany, you want to jump in and say what she does for Serious Writer? Because I know she does a lot.
Yeah. So I always say, Hope's the best thing that ever happened to me. I love her so much. So it's truly a pleasure to work with her. She's so much fun, so agreeable. And Kyle says this too. She just gets things done well, and it's done right. And you don't really have to worry about anything. So Hope really helps me with the newsletter. She makes sure that all the things are in there that need to be in there. She'll draft emails for us, handles the support email now is something that she's taken over, and basically a lot of behind the scenes stuff Hope is handling. And so I know she does a lot for Kyle with his agency as well, but she's just one of the most amazing and funny people as well. I'm really excited that you guys get to meet her if you haven't yet already. She's going to become one of your favorite people.
Yes, she will. She definitely will on that. So the other thing is she is, besides a writer for articles, she's got some books that we want to talk about a little bit today too, besides the topic that we have in hand. But I got to share one thing that she has on her website, which I think was cute. She likes to procrastinate by connecting with readers on Instagram and Twitter. Now, I think that's work, not procrastination. You're building your platform on that. And if you don't follow her on Instagram, she's got some delightful photography and stuff. It just pulls you in. It's an example of an Instagram that you notice and pay attention to. So I want to compliment you on that too. So anyways, and we're glad to have you here, Hope. And she has just released, is it the second of the three?
Mm-hmm.
Second of the three books. And so I want you to, there she's got them. The first one's called Blaze, and the second one's called Den. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I want Melissa to talk a little bit about, is it Den that you just did the review on? Yeah, I want Melissa to add something about that, and then we'll let Hope do some talking.
Well, I've had the privilege to get to know Hope a little bit through writing, and we have connections and through Kyle and her friend Alyssa, and so we got to talking about each other's books, and she has endorsed mine as well, and so I got the chance to and read both Blaze and Den and endorse her books, and they are awesome. I highly recommend them. Great young adult fiction. And so the endorsement that I wrote for Den was that No YA novel is complete without gritty realism and characters you can't help but root for. Den passes with bold, blazing red colors. From gut-twisting anxiety to heartfelt heroics, Hope Bolinger continues her retelling of Daniel with all the teen angst and sensory-laden details you've come to expect, and a dash of humor thrown in for good measure. Den is honest and doesn't shy away from the hard issues, but tweets them head-on in the light of faith, and it's sure to draw you into the den and end with a bang.
Ooh, doesn't that intrigue you? First of all, when I read your review of that, I thought it was a well-written review, but it works because it intrigued me. So I've done enough talking. Hope, tell us a little bit about this trilogy real quick. And then a little bit more about Den that just released.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I am incredibly humbled by everything everyone's been saying. I mean, y'all just made my year. So thank you so much for everyone complimenting me. I'm not used to this, so this is, I blush really easily, so you're probably seeing me coming through like super pink right now, matching like the rose in my hair. Yeah, thank you so much for the intro to the Blaze trilogy. The Blaze trilogy, in the shortest words possible, is I take the book of Daniel and I throw it into a high school. So I essentially take the book, I chop it up into 3 portions, and each one kind of covers a different major event in Daniel. So if anyone's kind of familiar with the story, the first one kind of takes you to the fiery furnace. Second one takes you to the lion's den, and then the third one that just got contracted is all those crazy visions at the end. So we're going to see how I modernize those. And so the one that just came out is the one that kind of approaches the lion's den. We follow the main character, Danny, as he encounters various trials at this boarding school that he has been transferred to. And so in the second one, there is a seeming killer on the loose. So it's up to him to kind of uncover, is there a killer? If so, who is it? And is he next on the hit list?
Ooh, and your target's young adults, but I'm already seeing some people in the chat are reading it, so it sounds like it appeals to adults too.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about young adult fiction is most of the audience of young adult fiction are not actually in the young adult audience range. I mean, I read a ton of young adult fiction, so although teens do read it, I want to say 60% of the readers are not within the teen range.
Okay. And stuff. And you just got the contract for the third. Oh, congratulations. That is so exciting.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yay. So the first one is called Blaze.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I shouldn't put them down.
Yep. Familiar. There you go. And what a neat cover too. Who's the publisher? Just curious.
Okay, so the imprint is Illuminate YA. They're part of Iron Stream Media. So Iron Stream Media has like a lot of different imprints, but they are a Christian and clean YA imprint. So they try to put out cleaner titles for teens.
Okay, that sounds great. And stuff. Well, congratulations on that. And we, like I said, we wanted to be sure. And the Den just got released in July.
Yesterday. It just released yesterday. So it's been a little bit of a crazy week. But yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations. And so you're doing, I'm assuming, can you give us a quick hint on some of the marketing that you're doing? Because we always like to talk about marketing.
Oh yeah, there's a ton. So right now we're currently in the middle of the blog and podcast tour. So between July 14th and the 31st, I try to hop on at least one blog or podcast per day. There have been some days where there have been 2 or 3. And so that's been a big portion of it, reaching out to reviewers, endorsers, having a launch team, and having different challenges for them. We had a cover reveal at one point because that seems to be kind of in vogue right now for marketing. So just kind of different stuff like that. I mean, obviously the marketing is going to continue post-release, but that's kind of been the main drive for this specific one.
Just curious, and then how have you used Instagram for your marketing for?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. So first of all, the stories have been actually really helpful because I try not to post every single day because I feel like what works with my posting schedule is usually about once a week. So the stories have been really helpful because anytime I'm on a blog or anytime someone's reviewed it or something, I can give them a shout out in the story. So that's been really helpful. And then usually just posting once a week on the same day at a consistent time has been really good. So I don't know if that answers the question.
That does, because we've talked about that before. Bethany, do you have a marketing question at all before then we'll get back to our topic for today?
Not a marketing question, but I really loved that Hope said she was doing one a day, like not one a week, but like one a day. And I was like, yes, like I aspire to that, Hope.
Yeah. That's good. So that we can work on it. That shows that. Well, pitching to an agent at a conference. That was one topic that you and I had talked about that you could, and you said before we went on the air how much you love this topic. So give us some tips, background, wherever you want to start with that. I'm curious.
Oh boy, I mean, I have like a whole page here, so please feel free to stop me and we can talk about individual points or anything, because I don't want to be talking the whole time. Yeah, sure. I would love to talk about pitches. And I always forget, what advice I want to give until I go back to a conference and then I remember everything I want to talk about. So I recently was at the Taylor University conference, so that's why it's kind of fresh in my mind because it happened this past weekend, so a couple days ago. So yeah, all right, pitching to agents, and a little bit of background. I was a writer before I was an agent, so I know what it's like to be on both ends, what it's like to go and pitch to someone at a conference. The Blaze trilogy was pitched at a conference. I pitched to my agent at a conference before I signed with them. So first of all, if you have any chance to do it, I would suggest go and pitch to people at conferences. It's the best way to jump over that slush pile and the best way to make the best connections in the industry. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into some tips. So the first tip, some people might contradict me on this because it kind of just depends on the person, but most people don't want a whole lot of materials. So sometimes people say, here are my 3 chapters, here's my one sheet, here's my proposal. They'll try to give you, 20 or 40 different pages. And the thing is, especially if you're at a conference in person, you can only carry so much luggage back home. So if you have 30 something people pitching you and they're each giving you, 30 pages, you're going to be taking home, hundreds of pages home with you if they give you all those materials. So most of the time, all you kind of need is a business card and then a one sheet. Usually you don't need more than that. You can bring more than that if you want to. But most of the time they probably will just have you keep it and they'll say, okay, just send it to me via email or have your agent send it to me.
Do you have any quick tips on one sheets?
Yeah, one sheets. There's different formulas, and I believe Serious Writer actually does have a one sheet formula somewhere. So I'll have to find the link somewhere and maybe send it to you to put in the description. But usually it's good just to keep it as simple as possible. Elevator pitch is really important. So your pitch in the shortest amount of words possible. Usually 25 words is what's suggested.
What a challenge, though.
I know. Oh, it's so hard to, boil like 100,000 words down to 25, but that's usually a good thing to have on there. Headshot's good. If you have a website, any social media, because they will want to look you up online and see how visible you are. That's usually good. And then just anything that you think is really important, just think of it kind of as your resume. So when you give a resume to an employer, if you include special skills or something, think about what are your special skills as a writer that make you the most qualified to write this book, and then include it on there. I don't know, Bethany.
Yeah, I'm glad Bethany's going to look up that link for everybody, but I'm really glad you mentioned headshots because I learned that early on because these agents see so many people, and that even if it's really, really tiny down in the corner, that jars their memory of that appointment when they met with you and stuff. So I'm really glad you mentioned the headshot on that. That's a great tip. That's a great tip. There you go, Bethany. Thank you for finding that. You got a Serious Writers one sheet formula for writers conferences. Great. Thank you on that. Okay, I took you off your notes there. I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay, tip number 2 is just remember it's a conversation. Sometimes I'll have people and they'll have it memorized, they practiced it in front of their mirror so many times, and then, they stop short. They get kind of the deer in the headlights look, and they're like, oh no, I've forgotten what my pitch is. Oh no. And the thing is, it's just a conversation. We just want to hear what you're writing, what you're excited about. We know what it's kind of like to be on both ends. So, I at least personally try to be as encouraging as possible and just I just want to hear what you're working on. So it's okay to have notes in front of you. I've had people say, is it okay if I just read my pitch? I don't know if I'm going to remember it. It's fine to have that in front of you, but just no, it's just a conversation. Think of it kind of as a casual sort of interview. So not quite as formal as a job interview, but also there's still a level of professionalism there. So
I like it, but it is nerve-wracking.
I know.
It's very nerve-wracking, to sell yourself or take this baby and present it to somebody. It's just on that. So slow, deep breaths, I think, before we do that, right?
Oh yeah, and I've seen people practice it in the hallway with other conferees. So that's always helpful too. Practice it with your friends and family. But yeah, it's scary, but also as agents and editors, we know it's scary too. So most of us are going to try to make it as calming as possible. There are some people who are exceptions, but for the most part, especially at Christian conferences, you're going to find that people want to see you succeed and they want to see you get to that next level in the publishing journey.
Great tips. Good to know.
Next question. Have your elevator pitch down to 30 seconds if you can. What breaks my heart is sometimes at conferences, pitches can be they can give pitch times as short as 10 minutes, which of course is rapid fire. You have to get it all out on the table really quickly. And sometimes people have just spent the entire 10 minutes describing the world their book is set in and describing the whole plot. I can't even get in a question edgewise because the person's telling us our time is up already. So try to get your elevator pitch down to about 30 seconds and try to have kind of the whole pitch out in about 2 minutes because you're going to want to have time for questions and you're going to want to have extra time in there to possibly pitch other things if this agent or editor is not particularly interested in what you're pitching.
I'm sorry, Bethany, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know that at conferences I've been in line, like the lunch line or something, asking people about their book, and they'll do the same thing. They'll go through 10 minutes. And by that point, I don't even understand what the story is about anymore because they've gone so deep into the characters and the backstory and things. And I don't even remember what they're writing. And so it's actually a detriment. The more they explain, the less I actually understand what they're saying, which seems counterintuitive, but it's almost I don't even know where to go from the conversation after that.
And I think we've got to kind of be prepared as authors that there might be some silence because it takes them a while for them to take in what you've said and to look over your one sheet. Mm-hmm. And so I always think silence is okay. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, and definitely think of it as an interview. Sometimes in an interview, less is more. Sometimes when an employer asks you a question, you kind of want to give the most succinct answer possible that gives the most information. So that's kind of a best way to think of these pitches is if you just kind of keep talking. Like Bethany said, first of all, they're going to kind of lose details anyway in the translation, but they also might lose interest. So you want to keep that interest as strong as possible for the 10 to 15 minutes that you have to talk to them.
How much as an agent do you look at, let's ask the dreaded platform question, but the background, the of the author and the platform? Do you get into that or what?
I do, especially if you are in nonfiction, especially for some reason, that seems to be the one where people look at platform the most. But I've talked to different publishers. I'm usually on a publisher call a couple times a week. And publishers who are even taking on children's now, who are taking on fiction, they're saying, if someone has substantial platform and another person has an okay platform, if worse comes to worse, we're going to pick the person who has the most platform, because when they break out the P&L statements and when they are trying to see how much you can bring to the table, they're going to take on the person who's going to have to do the least amount of work marketing wise.
Yeah, and I think it's harder even now under COVID than it was even a couple years ago, and it was tough a couple years ago on that way. I had an editor asked me once a long time ago, he says, well, what makes you qualified to write this topic? And I'm nonfiction. And that threw me off. So I've always tried to be prepared for that question now. And I haven't been asked that since then. But just the way she said that, and she didn't mean it accusatory, but I could have taken that as an opportunity to sell myself at that point, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the answer right there in my head. So that was a key lesson for me in being prepared to go in and talk to an agent on that.
I'll follow up on you with a mistake that I made. I had an editor ask me about like a comp title similar to my book. Like he asked me like what other books were selling right now, and he wasn't trying to trick me. He was legitimately asking, and he asked actually about an author who had written a book about that. I didn't even know who she was, and she was one of their best-selling authors on the topic there. And I was just like, it was my first conference. I was so green, but I never forgot that. And so I thought I will always have 2 or 3 specific to the publisher, or if the agent has done work with that, so that way I at least look like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to market analysis. But I remember feeling so like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything.
So it's going back the importance of preparation before you talk to an agent and or editor, isn't it, Hope? That preparation.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember when I was a writer, I got asked similar questions and I did not know. I remember the first time Kyle Young asked me the platform question, I just kind of froze and I was like, I didn't know what platform was. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'm like a Facebook. I didn't know what it was. And so he's kind of like, yeah, you want to work on platform. And I said, okay. So, I mean, yeah, preparation is kind of everything. Again, like coming back to, it's kind of like a job interview, the difference between you and another candidate who's interviewing. If you come the most prepared, they're going to feel kind of more at ease saying, okay, this person kind of knows what they're talking about. And so they're going to kind of charge into whatever reading materials you're giving them with confidence.
Should you stalk that agent ahead of time to know, I'm saying this nicely, but to know something about them at least, or like, I'm going to pick on Kyle because he's from Michigan and I'm from Ohio. Well, whoa, I better not mention the Buckeyes, and he played for Michigan, of all things. I should not mention the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State Buckeye, go OH. But anyway, should you do some stalking about that person ahead of time?
Oh yes, I highly recommend stalking. Oh man, I'm gonna regret saying that. But yes, I mean, it's good to do your research. Obviously, don't show them you stalked them, because I've had some creeper meetings at certain conferences, not ever really Christian conferences, but more general market. I've had especially some men show that they stalked me a little bit too much. But I mean, do your research. They're gonna put what they're looking for in their bio. Usually conferences will provide is looking for nonfiction, is not looking for early readers. So if you have an early reader, do not pitch them, because they're gonna kind of sit there and say, oh, how do I nicely tell them I can't take on this book? So yeah, I mean, definitely do your research. If you're wanting to work with this person, whether they're an agent or they're a publisher, you will want to know what they're about, what they're like, because if you don't, you might not be a good fit for them, and then you're going to kind of waste the time of each other in a 10 or 15-minute pitch.
Yeah. Bethany, do you want to say something about the comment that you just made about in the comps and stuff like that? And maybe we get Hope's response to that.
Yeah. So Tina had said something about making sure the comp titles, like in a proposal, were within the last 5 years, and then not including the bestsellers. And I think that's good advice too. And I mentioned that Kyle said something about 8 to 10 comps, which I hate comps. So I was like, why are you making us do more? But then I just made a note that sometimes if there's a best-selling book that's older than 5 years, sometimes I will mention it, but I'll put a note in there, like I will actually put New York Times bestseller, whatever it is, and I'll just make a note like, this was, 10 years old, but continues to sell well. And then I'll still do like a comparison, similar and different. But I make sure I've got plenty of others within the last few years to back it up. So I'm not just riding on the bestseller book. But I want to make it, I want to put it in there because I want them to know that I know about it, right? Because they know about it.
Yeah, that's true. Hope, comments on that, on the comps? And
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't know necessarily if you need 8 to 10. I mean, it's great to have that many. Usually I recommend having 4. That's usually a pretty good one, but they do have to be published within the last 5 years. I can't tell you how many proposals I get where they have Narnia as a comp title, where they have Harry Potter as a comp title. And, these were just published decades ago, and they're not necessarily what is being published right now. So that 5-year rule is really important. I like to kind of follow the footnotes on Amazon. So if I have read a book that I know is similar, they'll say, those who bought this have also bought this. And so I'll look over the descriptions, and if it seems like it's similar, I will buy it, I'll give it a read, and I will know if it's similar or not through that way. So yeah, reading is just important in general, but it is important to read books that have been recently published, because then you can know how yours is kind of holding up against other ones in the market.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's all right to use some of the older bestsellers within reason, but stay within 5 years.
Yeah, what I'm actually commonly seeing, especially in kid lit, but I'm seeing in other genres as well, is kind of a this meets this sort of thing. So, and sometimes they don't even just use books. They might even use like TV shows. Like every middle grade out there I'm seeing now is Stranger Things meets Nevermore, Stranger Things meets some other title. So, I mean, knowing other comp titles is helpful. You can say this is the newest Pride and Prejudice, or this is the newest Scarlet Pimpernel. You know, those are becoming really popular right now too. But so yeah, you can use other bestsellers as a reference. I used One Flew Over for one of my books, but it is important to have those 3 or 4 recent published ones.
And we had a question a while back on the chat, so I don't want to forget it. I think it was from Rhonda about you made the comment that you were just at the Taylor University one, and I believe they did go online, and they go online. So everybody's kind of switched to online. And how does that work as an agent, and tips on? Right now we're not seeing a lot of them in person. It's online, and it's still a little bit awkward. I don't know, but you want to give us some tips about online meeting versus in person? Or
Yeah, so I mean, most of the meetings I've been a part of, so I want to say I've been a part of like somewhere between 10 to 15 conferences online this year, just because of the nature of it being a little easier access. Just try to find a room that's pretty secluded. I can't tell you how many times I saw like, you know, like someone's spouse walking in the background, or like a dog running around or something. So try to find a secluded place you can. I think we kind of all are used to at this point though, working from home, and interruptions happen. So it's fine if they do, but it's honestly really similar to meeting with a person. It's just you don't get to shake their hand, and you can't really quite read as many nonverbal cues, but it's pretty similar. You can usually tell even on a face-to-face meeting if someone is interested in what you're pitching, or if they kind of look a little bit uncomfortable and not so sure. So yeah, I would say it's similar. It's not quite the same, but I mean, the same prep that you would do for an in-person conference, do for an online conference, just be prepared for it to be slightly different.
Yeah, I found a certain there was an intimacy in one way, because it was just 2 of us face to face, that you don't get at a conference because there's so much busyness going all around, and noise and all that. So that in some ways I kind of liked it. I had his and her full attention for 10-15 minutes, you know, and that was really good. And several of them in the comment are saying that's really the only way they can do it right now. Isabel comes with us each week from France, Hope, so she joins us each week. So it is sometimes, and Melissa way out in Wyoming, is it, Melissa? Sometimes that is the only, and so I kind of hope when we go back to in-person conferences that maybe there's that little extra online with maybe some of the agents and editors that we could add on to it.
Honestly, yeah, I hope for that too, because sometimes it's really difficult to make it out to certain conferences. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, we can move you out to here. And I mean, I have my dad's old cat at home, and he's super high maintenance. He basically like, I cannot leave the house, otherwise he gets like an infection. So I have to stay home with him. So it's difficult to kind of get out for longer than a day or 2. So if it's a really long conference, it might be difficult on me. I know there are certain agents who are really far away from every single conference that's out there. So I'm hoping online's an added option too. I also really like kind of the one-on-one thing that happens with online, because sometimes at conferences you're in a hallway and you can't hear anything. You can't hear what the agent's asking. You can't hear what they're pitching. You're trying your best to kind of, you know, really hone your listening skills because it's just so loud. So I kind of like the online format.
I did too. And the other thing that occurred, I was at the Speak Up conference. I believe Joe might have been there too. She's in the chat. I can't remember who else from Writers Chat was over there. But we attended the conference the one week. All of my appointments were the following week. So they were like two separate things, and I could focus more other than being so nervous while I was listening to the presentations that, oh my gosh, I got to meet with him in an hour, and getting nervous about that. So yeah, I thought you were there, Joe. But so I enjoyed the split of having it at a different week. And I kind of think the those were all editors. They did too, because they could worry about their presentation and focus, and then they focused on their time schedule later. So that was just insight on that way. Well, we jumped off quite a bit. What else you got on your sheet there, Hope?
So many things. We're probably not going to get through all these. Okay. This one is really important. It may not seem important, but ask questions, please. So usually, especially me, I talk relatively fast. And so in my meetings, I will get most of my questions out within, let's say it's like a 15-minute meeting, probably by like minute 7 or 8, I will have asked all the questions I need to ask about this work to get kind of a general idea of what I need to know. And so by then I'll say, okay, do you have any questions for me? And this past conference, so this past conference, we actually had 20-minute meetings. And so I would ask this question around minute 9 or 10. And so I said, do you have any questions for me? And I want to say all but like one did not. They just said, nope, I have no questions. And so I had to, for like the next 10 minutes, try to like come up with things we could talk about their book. So don't put that on the agent or editor. Come prepared with questions. I mean, first of all, it shows us that you did your research. If you say, okay, I noticed this about your agency. Can you tell me more about this? Or what does an agent do? Or what are some books you've read recently that you really enjoyed? It could be honestly anything. Just come prepared with questions, because otherwise we might be sitting in 10-minute silence trying to figure out.
That is a great tip. What a great tip. Because they would be vital questions, but if you didn't get them asked, you still come away with the appointment. But if you could get more depth to that relationship and stuff. I'm curious, Melissa, you being a fiction writer, what would you ask?
Well, I was actually just going to ask, what questions should authors consider asking an agent? Because a lot of times you're so focused on that presentation of yourself and all the things you need to get out. You're sitting there, your wheels are spinning, wondering, well, did I present everything that I needed to ask? And you're not thinking, what do I need to know from the agent? So that actually just kind of got me wondering, what do I need to ask an agent?
Yeah. On that. You gave us some examples, Hope. Is there something you wish they'd always ask?
Well, that's a great question in itself, is just saying, what are some questions you wish I would have asked you? I mean, that's a great conversation starter too. But yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the individual agent. If someone sees that I particularly like middle grade and young adult and they're pitching me something that's different, they might say, okay, what are your thoughts on genre crossover? Is it okay if I venture into adult? Is it okay if I do nonfiction sometimes? That's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to also pitch other things too. Is it okay if I have other projects I can pitch to you in addition to this? It's good to ask an agent if they're open to you having multiple projects, because some will only send out one at a time. Some will send out multiple at a time. It's good to ask them what percentage they take. Do they take the standard 15%? Do they take less? Do they take more? They probably should not be taking more, but it's good to ask them. You can ask them what publications they might foresee a book that you pitched. What are some publications that you have in mind that might be open to a book like this? I mean, it's just kind of, you just come with a list of like 10 questions. You don't have to ask all of them, but see which ones they haven't answered in your initial conversation and kind of build off from there.
Yeah. And a couple of neat things in the chat that Sophia said she wrote down after her last appointment. How do you bring our books into the general market? Which is, I think, a key question right now. And Tina said what she would ask, what a healthy number of clients for an individual agent to represent. Is that a good question?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that. You can ask them how many clients they had, how many clients they've gotten contracts for, where they've gotten their contracts for. If they're a newer agent, maybe ask them what their plan is for their clients in the initial first 2 years, since usually the first 2 years are the defining years of an agent. So yeah, those would probably be some good
Okay.
questions to ask. But I mean, honestly, there's no really wrong question unless it's inappropriate, like. But again, I usually don't get asked those unless I'm at a general market conference. Christian conferences are usually fine with me not asking me really inappropriate questions. So yeah, all those are really good ones.
Okay, that's good. That's a great point. What else you got for us on your sheet?
Okay. Here's another tip, and people often don't think about this, especially if it is their first time, but do not mention that it is your first time pitching to someone. I cannot tell you how many people just say like, oh, I'm really nervous. It's my first time. Like, don't tell me this. Act like you know what you're doing. Have confidence. Fake it till you make it, as my tennis coach always said, as a lot of other people always say. Just really act like you know what you're doing. It's okay if you don't. Everyone kind of pitches a little differently, so I will not know the difference unless you point it out to me. So just don't mention that as your first time pitching to an agent.
I love that. I love it on that. And I got to kind of not laugh, but Rhonda actually shared, says, and instead of, she tended to concentrate on just saying, pick me. And maybe she should ask, why should I pick you as an agent? I don't know if
Yeah, it could be good to kind of say, how are you different than other agencies that I've been researching? What do you do for your clients? Because, there's some agencies who kind of are just kind of agencies in name. They don't necessarily do anything. I remember Kyle said his first agenting experience was not good. His agent basically did nothing with his manuscript for, I remember how long he was signed with them, maybe 6 months or something, but he heard nothing from them and they apparently did nothing. So it's important to kind of vet your agencies that you're interviewing right off the bat. Otherwise, you might end up in an agency relationship that you don't like.
And it is an interview on both sides. Do you fit that agent? Is that the right agent for you? And that's how job interviews are. You could go out and be well qualified for a certain job, but if it's not the right place to work or the right job, you're going to be frustrated and they're going to be frustrated. So is there a chemistry maybe? How do you sense that chemistry, Hope? What do you think? How do you sense that?
Yeah, so some of it's kind of subjective. So it kind of sometimes will come down to personality. Is their personality kind of something similar to, and the thing is, when I've worked with different clients, I've kind of learned what personalities kind of clash and which ones do not. But are they confident but not overconfident is usually something that agents will look for. You can kind of tell when people just say like, I'm going to be a best-selling author. Like, then you're kind of like, okay, back up there, maybe not. So that's kind of important. Someone who's willing to learn usually is a really big thing in chemistry. Are they willing, how do they take constructive criticism, especially if you get an agent for a critique ahead of time, or if you send them materials ahead of time, they will have feedback. So how do you respond to that feedback? Are you argumentative, or are you kind of saying, oh, that's a good idea, let me think on that? So, that's really important. But again, it's really subjective. There are certain agents who want really loud personalities, and there are certain agents who work better with people who are a little bit more introverted. So, that's really important for you to kind of figure out too. I remember when I was a writer and I met with some agents, I immediately knew, nope, I do not want to work with this person. We would not get along at all. So it's just kind of something you have to feel out in the meeting.
Okay. And how do you know, Tina asked this question, how do you know when it's time to switch? And how do we do it nicely, properly, ethically, I guess?
From your agency?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question. Okay, so first of all, it comes down to how long your contract is. So really look at your contract. Some of them will last 2 years, some of them will last 1, some longer than that. So see how long your contract term is, and when you're reaching the end of your term, if your contract allows you to sever it, then you can respectfully say, hey, I've appreciated all the work you've done for me. I kind of want to take my work in a different direction. And so I would like to sever our contract. If you are not at that point yet and you're just really feeling the strain of the relationship, I would say either hop on a call with your agent or just say, hey, I just want to be really honest. I really appreciate the work you've done for me, but I'm not necessarily feeling like we're the best fit. Is there a way we can sever our agreement prematurely? Because sometimes certain agencies will allow you to do that. Let's say you're, 7 months in, you're just not really feeling like you've gotten a groove going. You can sever it if they allow that in the contract. So really analyze that contract, make sure you're allowed to do that. And if you can, that is how just be as nice as possible. Make sure to show appreciation for what they have done so far. Don't ever burn bridges in this industry. But also, don't also beat around the bush. You can also say, I just don't feel like we're working well together, and I would like to sever our agreement.
And then sometimes situations change. I think that communicating back and forth what's really going on, I would think maybe in the writer or maybe even in the agent, home situations change, businesses change, and that they maybe can't be the right person where they were 6 months before, 12 months before. So that good communication, it always boils down to. You mentioned a comment about don't burn bridges, and I don't know if you want to put some more on that. That is so true. One of the interviews I had after Speak Up, she was not interested in my material and seeing it, but it was a delightful networking. And I think she and I will talk more at a different point. And who knows what place she'll be at, what her needs were. And I kept thinking, okay, maybe I'm planting a seed that 6 months from now she'll think, I know who I want for that project. I was hoping, you don't know, but you just don't know to build those relationships. So you want to say something about don't burn bridges and how?
Yeah, I'm going to try to rein myself back because I could talk about this forever. When I first pitched Kyle, he actually had initially rejected me. We worked some edits back and forth, and then he sent me kind of a form rejection letter. So, and I did not burn that bridge. I ended up interning for his agency, and that's kind of how I was able to reconnect later. But you just never know. You may have a terrible pitch with someone, and this actually was one of my tips. Don't burn the bridges. But you may have a not so good pitch, or it may not have gone how you anticipated, but people are going to watch how you react. I've had some people who I've rejected who reacted really well, and I said, well, I actually know this other agent over here. I think you'd be a perfect fit for them. And they actually have gotten contracted by those agents or by that publishing company. I just said, sometimes I'm just like, I'm not the best fit, but I know someone else who is. So sometimes that gets you a referral. If anything, they remember you in a good light. They'll remember that you were kind. You said thank you for your feedback. They will remember the people who were nice. And also, Bethany, I've talked about this. We also remember the people who were not so nice. You remember them very distinctly. And so there have been people who have been horrible to fellow agents of mine. And when they pitched to me, I remembered exactly how they treated those agents. And I remember thinking, I don't want to work with someone who treats them this way. So really, industry members talk. So make sure to be a good light and be a good steward of the time you're given and pitching to people.
Yeah. Do you have something to add to that, Bethany or Melissa?
That made me think of a question that would be good for authors to pose to agents is expectations. And I think a lot of the times the problems that happen between authors and agents is that not knowing what to expect in the relationship and asking what can they expect, maybe communication wise, or what does an agent do for them and what is reasonable and what is unreasonable to expect of an agent.
On that, Bethany, do you have something to jump in on that? Some of the experience or one way or the other?
Yeah, and not as an agent or an editor on my end, but sometimes we'll get, Hope or I will get some kind of super mean emails back to Serious Writer about things, and it's weird stuff, but emails get forwarded. And so, it is a small industry and people talk. And so, if you're nasty about things that don't matter, that's not somebody that I would want, I'm protective over Kyle as my business partner and as my agent, and Hope and the people that I love in this industry. And so if something's going on that's shady or mean, I don't want them to have their reputation taken down because they're associated with someone like that either. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And I think too, like Hope was saying, if you're mean or whatever coming back at an agent, they remember that, and then you'll be hard to work with in the future. So you might actually kill your contract because you're too aggressive waiting for them to even answer you in the first place. I'm sure there's tons of contracts that don't get signed because during that process of the agent figuring out if they want to take them on or not, that person shows some true colors there, and they're like, I'm not giving you to an editor, I'm not going to pass you on in the business because look how you're treating me.
Good point. And I see Rhonda said she always tries to send an empathetic thank you note, knowing it's hard to reject. Do those thank you notes really help? What do you think?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I always appreciate whenever I receive them because I know that they took the time to read the feedback I gave. I always try to give feedback too, which is usually kind of rare for an agent to send back, you know, some things you did really well and some things that you might want to take a look at. So anyone who sends back a thank you note, I get quite a few of them, but I will remember them, especially if I have an agency group chat that happens. So if someone says, oh, I got a submission from this person, it looks really interesting. If I see in my inbox that they thanked me, I'll say, I had a really good submissions experience with them. I'm not the best fit, but I highly recommend that you give it a good look because maybe.
Okay, because I'd sent them out after Speak Up and stuff, and actually heard back from 2 of them, and that correspondence back, you know, and so that felt like, again, it's relationship building. It sounds like on that. We've got good 5 minutes before we bring everybody back in. What are some other main points? Because I want to be sure you get some of your points there.
Okay, yeah, I think we covered most of these, so I will just do one that is kind of popular with Kyle, which is, and it's a little bit difficult to tell online, but you can kind of tell it's something known as look for the lean. And so kind of look to see if they're looking interested when you're pitching that first project. Because I remember the first time I pitched Kyle, he was not leaning in. He was not interested in the project that I pitched him. And guess what? This project is not published currently. So come prepared with other pitches. It does not matter if it is written or not. I pitched projects before that were just on a concept level before, and then we sent them to the publishers when I finally did write that. There is no time constraints. So I've gotten, you know, pitches that were pitched to me 2 years back from a conference. I do not, you know, say, well, they got this to me 2 years later, so I'm not going to take a look. You know, that does not matter to me. I want people to send their work when they feel it is the most ready. So come prepared. Kyle has told me stories of how he came with 20 different pitches for a 10-minute meeting, and he just went through all of them rapid fire. And I think they were interested in 8 or 9 of them. So, you know, you never know. So come prepared with multiple pitches. If they're kind of looking a little bit uncomfortable, say, well, you know, I also have this, because I've had people pitch me stuff before where, for instance, I don't really work with early readers. So they said, I have this early reader. I was kind of like looking like this. And then they said, but also I have this young adult manuscript. I'm like, oh, tell me more, because I love young adult. So, I mean, I was leaning in and I was more interested in the other pitch that they had than the previous one.
Okay. That sounds so look for the leaning in. Well, you know, that's something you can use as an author too. You got to watch your nonverbals. If you're sitting back like this, or you know, but you lean in, I think, if you're interested in them too, don't you think? So you could read those nonverbals on that. We're getting multiple questions now in the chat, so I want to get people on so they could ask their questions and stuff like that. But do you have anything else, Hope, before we invite people back on for some final questions?
I said, let's go ahead and dive into the questions. I do see quite a few of those in there. So,
and stuff. If you guys want to come on back in, I'm going to skim back through the chat. I was trying to think. Talk about concept sheets a little bit, Bethany, because there were some questions on that.
Okay, well, I'm kind of referring to, like, there might be a formal concept sheet, but when Michelle and I were at Catalyst, we pitched an editor. I saw Michelle whip out her laptop to a Word document, and it was literally titles and 2 or 3 sentences about book ideas that she had, and some of the ones we wanted to do together were on there. But we sold Platinum Faith on concept at that meeting, and then the editor she just took over, stood in front of Michelle's computer and started reading down through the list. And she's like, well, I like this one, this one, this one. And a lot of them were ones that Michelle hadn't even done proposals for, because she wasn't sure that it was like going to be right for the market. And it was not designed. It was not a one sheet about a specific book. It was just, here's other project ideas. And it was great. Even at conferences, we talk about like sliding a concept idea sheet across the table to an agent or editor, so they can say, okay, like, oh, especially magazine editors, right? Like, oh, this is good, we're looking for this, and you can sell more things that way. So it can look nice, like 12-point font and everything, but I don't know that you have to get like crazy designed with it. It's really just like, here's some ideas and just a tool.
Yeah, and Tina says sometimes she lists other, on the back of her back of the one sheet, she'll list some other available proposals. And I never thought about using the back sheet of the proposal. That's a thought, isn't it? That's a great idea. Is it, if you can't get back on, a couple of you, we must have put you in Writers Chat jail. You have to tell us and we have to let you back in. So if you're having trouble getting back in, just put it in the chat and we can get you back on video wise. Those of you that were here, we got a few minutes yet. Do you have another burning question?
One.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I was at the North Carolina conference, and an agent liked an idea I had and said to email her. And so life kind of happened, and it had been a little while. And when I finally emailed her, I didn't hear back from her. So what do? I emailed, there were 2 emails on her business card, and I sent an email to each. And so then I didn't do anything after that because I also didn't want to be a pest. Well,
Yeah, no, this is a good question. Okay, so first thing I would do is I would hop on to that agent's website and see if on the submissions page or somewhere is listed a kind of nudge time, or a like when you can, if you've queried me and you haven't heard back in 6 to 8 weeks or haven't heard back in 3 months, send me a follow-up email. If that's not on there, my rule of thumb is 6 to 8 weeks. So wait for 8 weeks. If you've not heard, then you're not being a pest. If you're saying, hey, just checking in on this, because, you know, actually agents lose a lot of emails. So do publishers. You know, as agents, I will check in every 6 months to make sure that it didn't get lost in cyberspace. And you would not believe the number of people who said, oh my goodness, I meant to respond to this, or oh my goodness, I lost this. You would not believe how many emails get lost in this industry. So it's totally fine to send a follow-up. Just make sure there's a good bit of time in between. I've had people follow up with me like every single week, and those people I said, okay, sorry, I don't know if we're the best fit for each other, especially if they're like messaging like on LinkedIn as one of the examples. So don't do that. But yeah, I'm sure you are being respectful, and so it's totally fine to nudge them and see where they are in the submissions process.
now what if it's a year and then some later? Is it too late?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say so. There are certain publishers who who don't hear back within a year, and I will nudge them saying, hey, we sent this a year ago. What's up with this submission? So no, there's no certain time. And honestly, it may have gotten lost. And so if that's the case, they might say, I'm so sorry, I can't find this in my emails. Would you resend it? And then usually they get on those pretty quickly too, because they are kind of trying to make up for lost time too. So it's totally fine if there's been a decent amount of time in between with follow-up times.
Yeah. Lori wanted to know if you had any online conferences coming up that you think would be good to attend for us to.
Well, I mean, obviously I always recommend the Serious Writer ones. I don't know if we have any upcoming ones coming soon. I know we have some in 2021. I'm going to a number of Writers Day workshops, and I'm going to be online at one known as WriterCon in September. But I think for the most part, most of the conferences I've been on are kind of winding down because summer is usually the time for most of them. I see FCWC is in October. I mean, honestly, most Christian conferences I recommend. I don't know what Maranatha is doing, but I always recommend Maranatha. Right to Publish, when it comes around again, I always recommend that one. Let me think, what else? I mean, I always recommend the Taylor University one. That one just happened though. But yeah, I mean, I highly recommend most faith-based conferences just because it's a great community. You usually just get a lot out of those. People are just so kind. People want to see you succeed, so they, will be willing to offer a business card, offer, a conversation off to the side. So, I mean, I usually recommend those. I hear Blue Ridge is really good. I haven't been to that one personally, but every agent who I've known to go there. If you like speculative, sci-fi, fantasy, I hear Realm Makers is an incredible conference, and so people usually recommend that one too.
Yeah, and you're talking about Florida Christian Writers Conference. I think you aren't in that what you're talking about in the chat, Bethany?
FCWC?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. I was at a conference and I pitched a book to an editor. And she said, send it, send me your proposal. I'm very interested. But she also said, but I don't work with authors. I just caution, we don't work with authors who don't have agents. And I've spent the rest of the time pursuing an agent, and I've had some disappointments along the way. I'm still looking for that person. So do I send it to her and say, look, I don't have an agent yet, but do you want to see this? Or do I just back off and wait and send it to her after I get an agent?
Oh no, this is a good question. Because honestly, I think both paths, neither one is incorrect. I've seen people do it kind of both ways. So sometimes they might send it to the editor and the editor says, I'm ready to contract this. If you have an agent, let's do this. Then I've seen people go to agents and say, I already have a contract. Are you interested in representing me? And a lot of times agents will immediately want to jump on that because it's a contract. You know, they're going to be pretty excited about that. They're going to know that you are going to have winning results with your books. I've also seen it the other way around. They might say, I have interest in this publisher. It's a little bit riskier to do that because the publisher may still ultimately not go for the book. But either direction's totally fine. But I mean, I would maybe send it to the editor and just say, like, I'm still pursuing agents. I do want to be agented. And if you are interested in this, I will make sure to secure an agent for this. But I don't think either one is incorrect. I would say pray about it, ask God's direction for it. That you can never go wrong with praying about your publishing direction. It's important to include him in any part of the process. But yeah, I don't think either direction is incorrect. I think both have benefits and both have downsides.
Okay, we got about a minute left. One last minute question before we quit the recording. Okay.
I think Brandy had a question, or no? Okay, I misread that. I thought like maybe you just weren't doing like a hand all the way up. Sorry.
Okay, Melissa, while we're on the recording, do you want to mention what next week is?
Oh yeah, well, I'm excited. Next week, we're going to have best-selling Christian author Hallie Bridgman join us, and she's going to talk about writing in layers. She's going to share her process for how to write a novel in a month.
Ooh,
Yes.
Wow.
sounds
Nice.
good.
Good.
I attended that workshop at a conference with Hallie. It's outstanding. If you especially if you write fiction, you don't want to miss this.
Can you get, I imagine almost always if a nonfiction person listens to a fiction workshop, you learn something. So I'm assuming there'll be
Oh yes, it's going to be beneficial for both, I'm sure.
beneficial for everybody. So that sounds exciting on that way. Hope, thank you, thank you, thank you. Congratulations on Blaze and Den. We're excited that it's a trilogy too. How neat. Because that always builds your platform, I think, too, builds your audience. Because once they read one, they want another one, and they want another one, or they go back, they read two, and they want to go back and get one. So what a wonderful thing in your both your enthusiasm and your knowledge and your go-gettingness of all the articles that you write. It's just it's inspirational. So we appreciate you being with us today. What we normally do, guys, and most of you guys know this, is we quit the recording, but we invite you to stay for a few minutes afterwards for an after party if you got a last minute question or anything to share and add. And we're really glad that so many of you were with us today. The chat was full. It looks like a lot of participants here today. And if you take the time to watch this on replay, thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, thank you, Hope, for being with you. And we'll see you all next week. And we don't have to dress in layers to write in layers, do we, Melissa?
I don't think so.
A little more. All right. All right. See you all next week on Writers Chat. Bye now.